Today we'll be talking about essays, proofs, and reprints of British India, how and when the first stamps of India were printed, their precursors, and some of the proofs and the later reprints that were made using the same plates. So let me start that. So before the stamps were even printed, the way of sending mail was without using any stamps, obviously. And this is one of the earliest correspondence with India in the 17th century, when we see one of the earliest mails from India. Sorry, my phone is going off. So the first postal marking in India was in the late 1700s, which is known as the bishop mark. If you can see the circular postmark with the month and the date handwritten on top. So that was the earliest postmark. Then came the hand-stamped period. This is also the pre-stamp period, where the post office would hand stamp with the name of the post office and would handwrite the amount paid. So there's an example here, and this continued till about 1854. Here's another example: mail going with the use of a forwarding agent. They were able to deliver mail faster, in a faster method. Of course, they would charge more. The charges were prohibitive, but people used to send mail through them as well, some important mails. So in 1850, when the penny black was printed, India thought that it's a good idea to try to print stamps in India and follow the GB, how it's done in GB. So the first attempt, in 1854, this was the first attempt to print color in India. There was no color printing before that. So it was started by the process of lithography, which was basically you take a stone plate and paint the design in a greasy ink. Of course, the grease and water, they do not blend. So taking advantage of that, you print the stone with in greasy ink and then let it dry. Once it's dried, then the plate was used, the stone was used, water was spread all over the stone, and the area that was not that was greased would not, the water would not soak that, and then a roller would be used to roll the ink onto the plate, where only the printed area would absorb it, and then the sheet of paper would be pressed on top, and that's how you get the stamps printed. So Colonel Forbes, he was the superintendent at the Mint, and he was responsible for designing the first stamps, well, the essay. Basically, he made some designs of stamps, and he used the design of the gold moher, the gold coin that was prevalent in those days in India. So he designed this lion and palm tree. Of course, it never got printed, so it's an essay. It's in the essay state. So here's these are the die proofs from the original dies. The die was engraved in steel, and from that, there were several dies made out of that. So this is one of the photo-synchronized illustrations, which was used from the bunch of the dies. These were the later reprints. Since this never came into production, these are the later reprints. I should talk about the essays, reprints, and specimens actually at this point. The essays were done prior to 1854, prior to the printing of the stamps. Then the reprint, the first reprint was done when in 1890, which was when the Tapling. Now this is not confirmed, but most likely it was done when Tapling had visited India, which is around the same time when these reprints were done. And it might have been Hausberg that was responsible for this. And then the second set of reprints were done in 1921. This coincided with the visit of Prince of Wales, which was printed by the Calcutta Government Press during that time. Now, we're not sure if this was for the visit of Prince of Wales, or it was done because it was done around the same time. That's what we think it was done for. So these are this is a sheet of the reprint, which was taken from during 1890, and there's two different dyes, the left side being dye 2 and the right column being dye 3 of them. Here's another example, and this was in 1922. Like there was one in 1890, the other one was in 1921-22. So this is before the defacement of the dyes. They took the last set of copies, and there were only 4 sheets of each printed. This is they printed another color. These were for collecting purposes. And then because of the process and the engraving and finally embossing the stamps, it was very cumbersome and it wasn't too practical. So Captain Thulia was given charge to design a postage stamp which was supposed to be printed by lithography. So he proposed various designs of the half anna, 1 anna, 2 anna, and 4 anna. Now I'm going to talk about, this could have been done in either way. Either I could have done by the values or I could have done by the date. But I think it would be better to do it by value. So this presentation, I've done it by value. So I'm going to be talking about the half anna, then the 1 anna, then 2 annas, 4 annas, and then the 8 annas, which I'll come to. So these were the designs that were made in UK, and which was obviously not approved because it was decided that the stamps were supposed to be locally printed in India. So very few of these are known. So this was the first design of the half anna that was submitted by Captain Thulia. And this is a die proof of the same, which was taken before the defacement of the plate. Now, so that design did not work, so he submitted another design, which was first adopted for the printing of postage stamps in India. And there was a problem with this. So this is also known as SG1, the first stamp of India, but this never came into production. The reason being is UK supplied the printing ink because of the climatic conditions in India. They were not able to come up with the correct ink, so they imported it from UK, which was the deep vermilion ink. Now they printed, there were several sheets printed out of the deep vermilion ink till they ran out of it, and they had to reorder, and during those times, it was very, very hard to get the ink, anything from London right away. So they had to try to make the pigment in India, This is very interesting. So they tried to replicate the deep vermilion ink, and they were very, very close. They came very close to it. And you can see on the left-hand side, how do I do the, can you see my mouse, Pratisad?
Yeah.
See the mouse?
Yeah.
You can see your mouse. You can point the cursor.
Wonderful. I'm not very good at this doing presentations, sorry. So the one on the right, this was the original deep vermilion ink from UK, and this was the locally produced one in India, and you can see it is very close, but there was one problem with this ink. This actually wore off the plate due to some acidity or something it had, that it just destroyed the plates, the original plates. So finally, this was all engraved by hand, so they could not replicate the exact same design. So they came up with a different design. So this was the design that was actually approved. You see the one on the left-hand side. This was the actual design that was approved. And this is one of the impressions that was taken from the plate. There's another one in blue. Now these are the essays. So the difference, I actually I did not add a slide to show the details of this. I don't know if there's a way to enlarge it so I could show. These are the essays. The only difference between the printed ones and the essays is, Markan, I cannot use my mouse anymore. Does somebody have control?
No, Pratisad have control. You can't use your mouse.
You can see your mouse.
We can see the cursor.
I cannot see the cursor myself.
It's in the center of the screen.
Okay, now I see it.
Yeah.
So the difference over here is, this is with the cross. If you can see, there's a cross over here. And this is the essay head, essay stamp. And the original, the one that was printed later on, is a little different. We'll come to that. So these are the specimens, and these are the transfers taken from the plates. And this is a full sheet. This is how it was proposed to be printed in this format. But this one also is using the essay die.
That's amazing.
So this is another. This is a different setting from the same die, but a different setting. The plate in a different color. And here's yet another one with a different setting. There are various different types. I'm only showing the differences in the design, and some of the colors I'm showing very little over here. So finally, in India, Maniruddin, he came up with the design with using the head of the forerunner. And the difference over here, if you can see, this is not a cross. This is a white. It's a reverse cross, basically. So this was actually used for, this die was used for the printing of the final stamps. And the design was later on engraved and re-engraved, which gave the die 1, die 2, and die 3 of the so-called half-anna stamp. This is the proof of the actual, from the actual die that was used to print the half-anna stamp. This is the exact replica of the half-anna stamp. And this is another impression that was taken later on in 1894 from the same plate that was used for the printing. And then parallelly, now we did the half-anna. Parallelly, 1-anna design was also submitted when the lion and palm tree essay was produced, the 1 Anna design of the Gothic crown with the Gothic crown was submitted as well. This is
இதுல இருந்து வந்திருக்கு வரலி கொலிவாடா.
So this was just like the lion and palm tree. The 1 Anna was also embossed, and this was not very practical. So just like the half Anna, they had to try a different process. So this was the reprints that were taken later on before the defacement of the dies. Not too sure why one of the settings was inverted. And this is very similar to the half Anna. This is the design that was done in UK. This is the 1 Anna design which now got approved. So this is similar to the half Anna design that Captain Thulia submitted. This was the 1 Anna. It was supposed to be done in a different color. So with the different value tablet and everything else remaining the same. This is one of the impressions taken later on. Now, parallel to the half Anna stamp with the essay head, the 1 Anna was also submitted, this design with the crosses in the corner. One of them is highlighted. The impression number 2, that was the one taken for the engraving of the issued stamp with the different cross though. This is another one in blue. And here's one of the die proofs that was taken later on in 1890. This is another one where both number 2 and number 8, these were re-engraved. And this was actually the one that were used. So this one, if you see the difference between this and the previous one, the left-hand side stamp is now disappeared. It probably where the plate was destroyed or something. There was some reason because of something, or they had destroyed it, so they had to rub it off, and they used only 7, row of 7. So this was the design that was used for the 1 Anna stamp. Prior to that, a 4 Anna design was also submitted. So we'll this is just the first page. This was with the essay head. This design was submitted. This is the essay head. The head is very different from the one that was printed later on. So this is an impression taken before the defacement of the die. This is a different setting with the essay head. These were printed in a 12 in a sheet with the wavy line and rosettes. This is a full sheet of that, which was done much later. The printing was done much later on. So this was the design that was actually adopted for the actual stamp. And these were printed in 3 different settings: the closed setting, medium setting, and the wide setting. Closed setting being 24 in a sheet, the medium setting being 12 in a sheet with a little bit wider spacing than the closed setting, and then the wider setting with the wavy line and rosettes and 12 in a sheet as well. Here's the reprint that was taken with the issued head. This is the actual stamp that was printed. Here's a sheet of 24. This is exactly how these were printed. This is from the original plate, an impression taken later on in 1894. And parallel to the half Anna and 1 Anna, the 2 Anna was also, the design of the 2 Anna was also carried out, and these were the first designs that were submitted, which resemble the British embossed issues. So this is one of the impressions taken from the lithographic transfer. This was also supposed to be printed in the lithography process. These essays were printed in lithography process, though the actual stamp later on that was approved was printed in typograph. Well, this is just a combination of different values in a different format on a sheet. Here's another impression from the plate. This is taken from the composite plate, an impression with all 4 values. And this was done by Hausberg, which is illustrated in his book. Now this is the actual approved design for the 2-ana stamp, and these are the photozincographed impressions that were made using the die. These are the color trials of the 2-ana that was submitted to get approved which color the 2-ana is going to be printed once the design was approved. Very nice colors. Interesting. But these are very crude printings because they used the individual die, and they just did this by hand, a couple copies of each just to submit to get the design, the color approved. Another value, 8 anas, was also proposed, and this is the design of the 8 ana stamp. And here's the impression, single impression taken from that during 1854. This is an impression taken later on. This is a reprint during the 1890s. This was taken. Here's another one with the specimen in the back. The 8 ana was never approved and was never printed. So, like you see, 4 of the 5 values were finally issued, and those are the numbers that were actually printed. This is the actual sheet. This is the final outcome. This is the half ana. This is exactly how it was printed. This is an original sheet of the printed stamp. This is the 1 ana. Sorry, I do not have. This is one of the drawbacks being a dealer as well. Both the sheets of 1 ana that I had is no longer with me, so this is all I had left. So I had to reconstruct this to give you guys the illustration of how this was done. The 2 ana was printed in 10 rows of 8 instead of the 12 rows of 8. This is also the original sheet. This is one of the examples of 4 ana. This is the white setting with the wavy lines and rosettes. And then here's a famous inverted head, which some people, they thought it's the inverted frame, which was later on proved wrong because the frame was printed before the head was printed. That's all, everyone.